And sometimes you should never take anything for granted, especially your quality of life. Most people don't realize their quality of life is slipping until it's already gone. And that decline don't come with a warning. And the question becomes, did I mess up or did the people in charge mess up? The Canadians had to learn that the hard way. This is Canada, hands down one of the most beautiful countries in the world. Not just geographically, but also absolutely one of the best countries in the world to live in. You know, there was a time when Canada really felt like a country you'd want to be in. When you and your family were looking for a fresh start, a better life, Canada was that country. They wanted migrants and migrants wanted them. We're talking about the late 1800s, well into the early 1900s, when Canada had the world's fastest growing economy. Not just then, but all throughout the 1900s, even a little bit of the 2000s, Canada was a very strong and impressive nation across the board. It was the land of opportunity, economic promises, and a future worth chasing. It was a time when Canadians still believed that hard work could buy you a house, when universities were still affordable, productivity was high and still growing, and wages grew with it, when one job could still feed an entire family and people still felt that each generation would do better than the last. But all that has been changing. How, you ask? Well, I'm gonna tell you. Now I need you to pay attention, because this part is kind of crazy. Canada has now joined a group of countries with some of the lowest fertility rates in the entire world. I'm talking Spain, Italy, Japan, and South Korea. And you know how bad it is in South Korea. In 2023, the average number of kids per woman in Canada dropped to just 1.2. That's down from 1.3 the year before. I know this might not mean much to you, but it's a really big problem. For anyone who's not familiar with the term fertility rates or birth rates, it's basically how many children on average a woman has over her lifetime. And you should also know anything below 2.1 means the population isn't replacing itself. And Canada is well below that number and has been since the early 70s. So why does this matter? What exactly happens when a country keeps falling below that number? First of all, you need to understand why 2.1. I want you to pay attention. 2 is for replacing the two parents, replacing themselves, of course. And point 1 is to cover for things like infant mortality and cover for other women who will not have any kids. This number is just absolute minimum needed to keep population steady. Just that, not growing, but also not shrinking. But when for some reason this number falls below 2.1, which as we've established is replacement level, over time the population starts shrinking and aging, which means fewer workers and more retirees, which puts pressure on the healthcare system, pensions, and the overall economy. Listen closely. Fewer people being born means fewer young people entering the workforce. And fewer people entering the workforce means labor shortages. And labor shortages means slower economic growth. And slower economic growth means shrinking tax base. A tax base that supports public services that includes paying healthcare and pensions to retirees, which as a country you now have a lot of. Imagine trying to support a growing number of retirees with a shrinking number of taxpayers. Now you see the problem? This is why countries like France try to increase the age of retirement. The idea here being, if there are no young people to work, why don't we get old heads working in factories? But what if I told you that there was a time when those birth rate numbers changed course and stopped falling and instead grew at an impressive rate? And it's not that long ago. Recently, in the early 2000s, in the year 2000, birth rates were at 1.5 kids per woman. But by 2008, the numbers had grown at 1.7 before it started falling again. So you may ask, why? Why this particular time? Well, I'm going to tell you. The economy was doing numbers, impressive numbers. You can see these GDP figures yourself. It was kind of a golden era. Turns out, nothing can beat people's confidence in the economy. Canada's GDP went from $744 billion in 2000 to $1.5 trillion in 2008. Same with GDP per capita, $24,000 to $46,000. That's doubling the economy right there. And also, the government started offering better parental leave and child benefits. Quebec was a champion at this, and that's why for some time it had the highest birth rate in the nation. Of course, immigration also plays a part because newcomers tend to have slightly more kids than the locals. When I found out that British Columbia has the lowest birth rates per woman, I was curious to see the province with the highest, and the province of Nunavut popped up. Now, as a non-Canadian, this was the first time I've ever heard of a place called Nunavut. And here I was trying to see why the province is doing so well. Turns out, they are not doing so well at all. As a matter of fact, this has to be the most broken place in Canada. While most of the country is having fewer kids, Nunavut completely breaks the trend, sitting at 2.7 kids per woman. Numbers not heard in Canada for the past 50 years. That's double the national average. They might seem like they are champions until you look a little deeper. There is something I didn't tell you. You see, Nunavut mothers are some of the youngest in the country. How young, you ask? 15 to 20 years old. 15 to 20 years old girls becoming parents. And you might say, life must be really simple over there for someone to have kids that early. Except, it's not. When I said this must be the most broken place in Canada, I wasn't lying. For starters, about half the births in Nunavut are to unmarried women, which should tell you a lot of those pregnancies probably weren't planned. But why are kids having kids in this specific part of Canada? In a way, these guys have a terrible system working for them. It feels like it's literally designed to ensure everybody's failure. It always goes back to a messed up system. Life in Nunavut is hard and really hard. It's one of the most expensive places to live in Canada. A small trip to the grocery store can easily double what you'd pay in the South. Jobs are limited, and good-paying ones usually require a higher education, something really hard to get when over half of the students in the province are high school dropouts. Now imagine trying to raise a child in this place. On the top of that, Nunavut has some of the highest rates of substance abuse and mental health problems in the country. Additionally, the healthcare system is underfunded, especially when it comes to mental health services. A lot of the communities there just don't have the support they need. Nunavut birth rate is high, and you'd think it's a sign that everything is great. But in reality, it's actually a red flag. Stats can look positive on paper. Meanwhile, they are coming from a place of hardship. It's like how underdeveloped countries, some of the least industrialized countries in the world, generally have fertility levels that are much higher. Now, you just can't talk about low national birth rate and ignore the humans behind those numbers. Women. So the question becomes, why are Canadian women having fewer babies? You may want to believe that it's just social norms and simply a cultural change, which you would be right. People no longer see women as baby factories anymore, or the fact that young people hate that parenting is a time-consuming task. It takes a lot of your time, your money, your energy. Basically, it's a lifestyle shift in a time when you just want to pay attention to your career and get money. Babies don't really fit the plan for a lot of young adults. And sure, some just simply don't want kids, which is fine. And there is this conversation on whether the world needs more babies anyway. We already have 8 billion monkey heads walking around, polluting the earth, fighting for the same finite resources. But in Canada's case, as an individual country, a shrinking population is always bad news. But the surprise here is that there is a little bit more to it. The story isn't that Canadians are avoiding kids, it's that they are delaying until later in life. Now, I want you to listen to this part closely. According to this report, it turns out that a lot of women actually want kids, more kids than they end up having. So the twist here is that more women in Canada actually want to have kids. Problem always becomes finances. Raising a family anywhere in the world is increasingly becoming expensive day by day. But in Canada, it's ridiculous how expensive it can get. Housing, daycare that can cost more than your rent, groceries, even trying to have a little fun, like a day at a park, a trip to the movie theater, or literally anything else. Good luck with those prices. It will leave your wallet begging for mercy. So that's why even the ones who end up having children just stop on their first. Now imagine this. A couple has their first child. They're excited, hopeful, throwing parties and stuff. Because remember, many women actually want kids. Many people want kids. But little did they know, reality is about to hit them. Suddenly, expenses explodes. Everything I told you. Housing, daycare, groceries, even with 2 jobs, 3 jobs, doesn't matter. You realize that a second child might not be a good idea. So these young folks in Canada aren't being anti-family. It's about a system that don't seem to support families anymore, unless you are rich. Let me introduce someone to you. A man named Justin Trudeau, this guy becomes the prime minister in 2015, looks at the problem of birth rates and says, easy, bring in migrants, lots of them. Now don't get me wrong, immigration can help with population decline in the short term, but it doesn't solve the root of the problem. Newcomers are not immune to whatever made the locals stop having children. Things like cost of living and other economic pressures, all that stuff will hit newcomers too. Immigrants aren't magically immune to the struggles of the average Canadian. But Mr. Trudeau went all in. I'm telling you, he didn't hold back. Canada experienced a population boom like no other. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Canada was the fastest growing country in the G7. The country was growing twice as fast as the US and the UK, and 4 times faster than France and Germany. My man Trudeau was like, hold my beer. He really took it personal. Just look at the numbers. Canada had around 34 million people in 2010. By 2023, they had over 40 million people. And the wildest part, they added 1.2 million people in just 1 year, between 2022 and 2023. Now here's where things start to fall apart. I need you to pay attention. Yes, Canada is the second biggest country in the world in terms of land size. That makes it sound like they have space for everyone. If 1 billion people can fit in China, when China is smaller than Canada, then we probably could fit way more people in the second largest country in the world. But that's where you'd be wrong. Why else do you think almost all Canadians live below this line, close to the southern border? It's because most of Canada is actually inhabitable in terms of human settlement. Canada is not that big at all. And to make things worse, so much of the land is locked up in zoning laws that only allows single-family homes, which are super spread out and take up a ton of space. And of course, everybody loves a detached home. I would never blame anyone for wanting their own backyard. But when you have a small land for people to live in, while at the same time planning to have 100 million people by the end of the century, I think maybe building upwards would be a more logical thing to do. And surprise, surprise, of course, this made housing even worse. I don't have to tell you about Canada's housing crisis. You've already probably heard how wild Canada's housing market is right now. If you haven't heard, all you need to know is it's pretty bad. One of the worst in the world. But seriously, what did they think was going to happen? You bring in millions of people in such a short period of time, but you don't build more housing, you don't improve infrastructure, you don't expand transit or hospitals or schools. Like, where are those people supposed to go? It's pretty simple. Supply and demand. Low supply, high demand pushes prices up. With a huge wave of migrants, of course the demand is going up. More people means more demand for everything. An increase in housing demand, both renting and buying, an increase in commuters. All of a sudden there are thousands of extra cars on the road, more people trying to get on a bus, train, airports, more people fighting for the same amount of job listings, more kids being sent to school, more patients in hospitals, even basic stuff like water, electricity, sewage, gas, everything is stretched thin. And housing is what made many Canadians skip having children. And the fix that the government introduced, which is immigrants, is making the cause of low birth rates even worse. Now you're stuck in a loop. Even migrants can't afford to have children either, leaving Canada relying on even more migration. So yeah, immigration can help boost population numbers, but if you don't plan for it, if you don't build for it, you are creating a whole new set of problems. If you like videos like this, please consider subscribing. Thank you and goodbye.